I'm going to answer your frequently asked questions from the vantage point of myself. So I am here to represent the quote-unquote Russian violin school or golden era bow technique from my perspective of someone who is using it, playing with it on a daily basis, and teaching it successfully. The first question is one that I have received many times in the last several months. The question is Leonidas Kavakos using Russian bow technique? So I am very excited to get into this today. Right away, we see the placement of the index finger. The next aspect that I want to point out to you is the pinky. If you look at the thumb, okay, let's discuss the thumb. So let's talk about his wrist for a minute. Okay, here we are. We have Mendelssohn. I want to talk about string crossings. Okay, so I mentioned earlier already that the ball and socket of the shoulder is responsible for the up and down vertical motion, string crossings here, bow changes here. Okay, my shoulder can do it all. This is how the Russian bow arm operates. Now we're going to look at his saltando string crossings, arpeggios in the cadenza of the Mendelssohn, okay? And you will see that again, he is using his shoulder as the mechanism to execute the string crossings from G all the way to E and back. You can see it in the height of his elbow from one string to the next. And again, it's the lack of the death grip on the bow that makes it so that this saltando in the arpeggios can function so beautifully, and that he can get those notes to ring even though they're so small. Okay, in the third movement of the Mendelssohn, he's playing a different bowing than most people do. So most people in this passage are doing a quick collee stroke, up, 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 up. So it's an up bow with a retake. He's changed the bowing here. That's his artistic choice. It makes it so we can't really see his collee mechanism as well, but we can still see it. You can see his wrist is still tall. Okay, and that means that the collee stroke is also coming from his shoulder. Look at this. This sautier is coming from his shoulder. It's not opening and closing his elbow. It's not opening and closing his wrist or his fingers. That is the defining attribute of Russian technique, okay? Guys, do you understand? It is not the placement of the index finger. It's how you use the entire bow arm and you originate everything from the shoulder. This is so beautiful, the way he does this collee stroke at the frog. How you know that the sautier is successful is it sounds clean, okay? It's not something that you can tell just by looking that the bow is departing from the string. It's not something like where you can actually see the bow depart from the string. We know that the sautier is successful because it sounds crisp. Okay, I want to watch a little bit of the Brahms Concerto, and I want to show you something very distinctive about where the bow change is originating from. So in what I would consider the purest perspective of Russian technique, the bow change is always going to be coming from the shoulder, regardless of what part of the bow we are playing in. That is for the purpose of being able to convey the natural weight of the arm all the way through the wrist, through the index finger. Even when we're playing out at the tip, we want this weight to be able to convey. So he's using the shoulder to initiate the bow change, and probably about the lower half of the bow, the bow is being drawn from the shoulder. But then as he gets out into the upper half, it's going to be, he's opening the elbow just enough, and then he's going to crack the wrist at the bottom. So he's got kind of elements of both. Now in Russian, we're going to initiate almost every bow change from the shoulder, even if it's out at the tip. So this is a difference between Franco-Belgian and Russian. The fact that I see some of the bow change happening with really frequent opening and closing. So it's acting as more of a pump than the swing. That's a big difference between the two. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of a mix that he has going on here. But in the Brahms, it's easier to see because we have a good view of him from the front. He also does a little bit of accomplishing the string crossings also by leveraging it from the elbow. So he's not on the lower strings. In Russian technique, in the lower strings, we are still going to operate from the shoulder, and we're going to access the lower strings from getting the height of my bow arm up and over to the other side of the violin. In Franco-Belgian technique, there's more of a flip from the elbow. So they're leveraging the bow to get up and over from the elbow instead of from the shoulder. So can you see that difference? And he does a combination of things. So I do see him leveraging from the elbow to get to the lower strings. So beautiful. Okay, I have to go back. Let's go back. So watch really carefully, and it's a little hard to see because the frame is cut off. But when he is in the upper half, he is still powering the bow change from the shoulder. Okay, he's doing the fast 16th notes in the upper half. Okay, so upper arm. Now watch. This bow change is coming from the shoulder. You can see his upper arm maneuvering the bow change actually. But he isn't always doing it like this. So sometimes, okay, he's out in the upper half. Sometimes he's using the swing, but other times he's using the pump. So he's doing a combination. For the most part, Kavakos is originating the bow change from the shoulder, especially in the lower half. But now as he's in the upper half, let's look. And I want you to notice that with these bow changes out at the tip, he's originating most of it from the elbow. So you can see now from this angle that as he's changing the bow out at the tip, he's opening the elbow, and he's also allowing the wrist to move down, to crack down at the bottom. Way more often than what I would consider typically what we see in the Russian bow arm. But partially, I think it's due to the fact that this passage is supposed to be more of a light passage. So he's not going to want to infuse all of the weight or pour all of the weight down into the bow arm at the tip, because he doesn't need that big robust tone that we see with the Russian bow arm. So that could be a question of his own personal choice to, shift gears into a bow change that is coming from the elbow when he's out at the tip. So now I want to do a little side-by-side comparison and watch Mr. Barati with his Russian bow technique and look at where his bow change is originating from. He's going to play Bach. So you can see that, when he's in the upper half, he is still originating this bow change from the shoulder. So this is what I would consider pristine Russian technique. And interesting that he is using this in his performance of the Bach, because, usually in Baroque performance practice, we hear violinists play Bach and it's considered important to play with a very light tone. But here, he still gets a really robust sound that I think it's so beautiful and it's so appropriate for this Bach. And I just think that his bow arm is a beautiful thing. I love to see it acting as one cohesive unit. It doesn't, the shape of the bow arm isn't changing, fluctuating with where he is out at the tip. It's operating as one unit, and even though the bow change is coming from the shoulder, his bow arm is still relaxed. It's true that critics of this technique will say that if we originate the bow arm from the shoulder, then everything has to be stiff and there's no flexibility. This is not true, okay? Because you can see in Barati's bow arm, he is originating from the shoulder, but the motion is very small. And he is treating the bow arm as one cohesive unit where the weight can flow and pour into his bow, even when he's at the tip. This impacts the sound quality more than anything else, okay? I think this is really a beautiful thing. This is a beautiful bow arm that Barati has. And even when he's out at the tip, he has a powerful tone because he is using the shoulder for the bow changes. It sounds so good. Okay, now we get to watch my favorite violinist, Igor Gruppman, who was my teacher. And he's playing the Prokofiev Concerto. We're going to see first, his long bow from the frog to the tip, and you can see that his bow change originates from the shoulder. He is not cracking the wrist when he goes to the tip. He doesn't crack the wrist at the bottom, and we saw that in Barati as well. So with Mr. Gruppman here, we're going to see in a minute. So this is sort of a long view. It's a little bit hard to see, but we will see in a minute as he is going to take these bow changes out at the tip, he's going to be able to retain a really strong tone. We have the spiccato also originating from the shoulder. This is pristine Russian technique, okay? Okay, now he's out at the tip, and this bow change, it's so far away, it's so hard to see. The bow change is still originating from the shoulder, and that's how we hear such a beautiful, big, strong tone. So, if there's one takeaway that I would wish for you today, it is this idea that the difference between Franco-Belgian and Russian is more than just merely the placement of the index finger. This placement of the index finger is to facilitate the natural arm weight. But the one takeaway I want you to know is that the biggest difference is where does the bow change originate from. So in pure Russian technique, the bow change is going to originate from the shoulder. Now, Mr. Groupman, you can see when he draws the long bow, he does allow the elbow to open in a very natural process. So going from frog to tip, yes, we have to open the elbow just a little. In order to keep the bow parallel to the bridge, we have to open the bow arm. We have to open the elbow enough. But you see the wrist is still tall and I can still pour the weight in. The difference is he's not originating. He's not ever going to originate the bow stroke. No matter what part of the bow he's in, it's never going to originate the change of bow direction from the elbow, okay? And certainly not from the wrist. So this is the biggest difference between Franco-Belgian technique and Russian technique. And he just sounds so good. I could watch this all day. So let's go back now to, we're going to watch that little segment of Kavakos again, okay? So he's choosing, when he's out at the tip, to originate the bow change from his elbow. Can you see that? Okay, the elbow goes open and close. The angle of the elbow is changing dramatically. So this is where the bow change is originating from. And it's appropriate for the depth of tone that he wants in the upper half. So again, this is in no way criticism. This is just an answer to the question, is he using Russian technique? Overall, based on my analysis, the answer to the question, is Kavakos using Russian technique? I would say mostly yes, with the exception of when he allows the knuckles to become motorized and fluctuate with the bow change. This aspect is Franco-Belgian, and when he originates the bow change from the elbow, that is also Franco-Belgian. Okay, but so in a purist Russian approach, there's not going to be any of that fluctuation. It's just going to be sort of completely dead, and the bow change still is purely originating from the shoulder, and there's no reaction. To conclude this video, I wanted to show you this exquisite sort of signature piece from Kavakos that I saw as I was, studying his performances. This is originally for guitar, and it's arranged for violin solo by Ricci. It is to die for exquisite. So I want to watch some of this and talk about how he's using the bow. There's a tremolo on the higher string. Sometimes it's on E string, sometimes it's on A string. The tremolo is ricochet. And the only way to do this is going to be by treating the bow as if it's a spring, as I told you before. The bow has to be free to actually vibrate in and of itself. So we want the stick to vibrate. It's not uncommon for violinists, when we're talking about bow technique, to call it a grip, like a bow grip. And that in and of itself sort of gives the impression that we're trying to hold it with force, and that is not true. It's incorrect. this is a really beautiful vantage point to see what it does look like, his Russian bow hold. But I'm never going to use the word grip, probably ever again. If we use the word grip to refer to how we hold the bow, okay, the Russian or Franco-Belgian bow grip, the imagery that starts to come into play is that we are grasping it with a lot of force. And I don't like that term because I don't like giving that impression that I am going to be holding my bow with a force that is giving me too much reassurance that I'm not going to drop it. So actually sometimes my students who are learning this Russian bow hold are sometimes going to say, I feel like I'm going to drop it. And if they do that, then I say that actually that's correct and that's what they should be feeling, because that bow has a life of its own. We are trying to create the condition that will allow the bow to jump, that will allow the bow to sing, that will allow it to vibrate as we push it across the string. So I'm not going to grip the bow. I'm going to hold my bow in as loose and with as minimal contact as possible. That is why the Russian bow hold is set up like this, because the shape of this hand and the shape of the bow are made to fit together without having to reach out and grab it. So all of that is just to say that I don't ever want my bow grip to stifle the vibration of the stick or to stifle the spring that should be naturally occurring with the way that my bow interacts with the string. And with regard to this Ricci arrangement that Kavakos is playing as an encore, aside from just the sheer virtuosity that enables him to do it, obviously, the component that is absolutely critical to this is the ability to hold the bow without that tension or without the death grip that gives you that reassurance that you're not going to drop the bow, but rather that the hand and the bow are meant to fit together without any tension or force. That is the only way to accomplish a tremolo ricochet like this. So whether or not it's Russian or Franco-Belgian, actually it really doesn't matter. It just has to do with, is he achieving the goal of holding the bow in a way that is as loose and relaxed as possible so that he can get the bow to spontaneously jump, to spontaneously ricochet, and he can control that sort of with a less is more approach, not by trying to force control of the bow, but by creating the condition that is holding the bow as loosely as possible and then creating the condition to get it to jump. In this, the tremolo ricochet, it's just so exquisite. It's so beautiful, and it's so stunning to watch the virtuosity that he displays in being able to do this. So this has been a really fun video to make. Thank you so much for this question of whether or not Kavakos is using Russian bow technique. Based on my analysis today, my answer would be yes, mostly. So the obvious components are there, the index finger placement and the tall wrist. But when it comes to the pathway of the bow arm and the origination of where the bow change originates from, he is sometimes veering towards more of the Franco-Belgian style. So by doing this, Kavakos sets the example for all of us of being able to pick and choose technical components in the moment of how we want to express ourselves and what is going to get us the best personal result. As I think most of us all agree, technique is a very personal choice, and as it should be, this is something that we can choose how we want to incorporate these different technical components to get the musical expression result that we want. So in our public discourse, it's really easy for us to fall into the trap of using these labels, Franco-Belgian or Russian, to try to identify and figure out what's going on in the technique. But in reality, these labels sort of muddy the waters, in my opinion. First of all, you've heard me say this already a million times, that they're not historically accurate, and they could never be historically accurate. When we tie the technique to the geographical location where we think they originated from, that presents a problem. That's a whole other topic of discussion. But from a technical standpoint, it really does muddy the waters, because we're trying to figure out how this technique originated, when what we really should be focusing on is what result does this technique produce. So categorizing them into these boxes is, in my opinion, it's not that helpful. It's very hard to categorize all of these things, because over the course of history, from one generation to the next, the technique is going to shift. The technique is going to evolve. And that's because of the personal choice of the violinist. We have every right to choose what technique we want to use, how we want to incorporate these technical components to give the result that we want on a personal level. So I am on a mission to advocate for Russian technique, or what is commonly referred to as Russian technique, golden era technique as I see it, because that is my preference, that is my chosen technique, and I like the outcome of that. So I am going to speak up as an advocate for Russian technique, but more so, I consider it part of my mission to advocate for more professionalism and courtesy in the public discourse about these two different violin schools of violin technique. I say two different schools of violin technique where the categories are very broad. Except for the index finger contact point, that sort of triggers us to start to apply these labels. And unfortunately, it also starts to trigger us to create some sort of false expectation of whether social acceptance is going to come into play. So that is what I would speak out against. I think that there is room for us all to be more courteous towards one another with respect to our own personal technical choices and the techniques that we are conveying to our students. With regard to these differing schools of violin technique, opinions about one school or the other can be fairly strong and passionate at times, but I think that there is room for more courtesy in this regard. I want to compliment you, my audience, those of you who have engaged in the comment section on my videos and on my channel, for that courtesy that you have already displayed. Even those of you who express that you prefer Franco-Belgian, and then you'll offer the reasons why. It's been very courteous and professional. I want to just encourage all of us to go forward, go out into the real world, and be courteous and respectful about the difference between these two techniques, whatever your opinion is, knowing that others, including students, are free to choose their chosen technical approach. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share if you find this content helpful. And as always, comment below. I love to hear your thoughts.